So I'm going to start with my favorite coach.
Okay,
All right, you already know who it is.
I do.
Who is it?
Mr. Rose.
Mr. Rose.
Yeah.
The best.
Okay, so wait, so give me like I want like some details of like, because I think this would be an interesting thing to do if we run through a couple of like, we're talking the age group
Yeah.
around the time he was teaching you
Sure.
and like those kind of things.
Sure.
And it could, because it'll be interesting to see like at what age the impact kind of was had,
Yeah.
so to speak. So go ahead.
Yeah. So he's the one that coached me the most. So he would have coached me, Mr. Rose again.
Mm-hmm.
Love him. So he would have coached me from. I think he was our assistant coach in minor Adam.
Mhm.
So that's U9 or 9, and he would have coached me right through, like, so 2 years of Pee Wee, 2 years of Bantam. So I would have had him for probably 4 to 5 years.
Mhm.
Okay. So the first year he was an assistant coach, but he was my favorite. Even though and when he was assistant coach, he backed off and just helped. Right. He got involved a little bit, but okay. So impactful then. Why did I like him at 9 years old? Because it was the first time, and I mean, I'm only 9, but the coaches I had before were guys that wore the jacket, and they were usually the hockey dad, and that's okay, that's fine, that's cool. But they were goofy, and I was like, as much as I knew hockey was everything to me, right? It was everything, like most kids. And I'm not saying I'm different, but I actually wanted to be really good at hockey at a young age because I had some jam to it, right?
Yep.
So the other coaches were like kind of goofing around. You could just tell, like as we said earlier, they didn't have anything to teach you about hockey.
Right.
And then when they did do things, like I sound arrogant here, but at 8 years old or 7 years old, the coach would show me, or they would do passing drills, and it's like, well, that's boring. Like I would say that in my head,
Yeah.
and I don't do it like this. It doesn't feel weird. I was processing that early,
Yeah.
so I was calling bullshit at 6, 7, 8 years old, right? So there was that. So when Mr. Rose came in, it was he did extra. So number one is he was actually really involved. So he told us that we're going to do a lot of skating and puck skills, is what he called it, right? And fitness. We're going to go after practices on Saturdays, and we're going to do fitness. So we didn't know what fitness was at 9, 10 years old. All we knew is that we did it. So to say that I love doing the running and the stairs and all that stuff at 9 or 10, I'd be lying. But
Yeah.
I didn't dislike it, and I didn't know the person, but I did it. But but one thing that stood out to me is that he did it. Like I swear to God, the one thing that stood out is that he did it. So number one, we had a lot of practice, and if he could get any extra ice ever, he would. And now, looking at it as an adult, maybe he was a crazy dad too, but nonetheless, he was committed to it, and he had practice that we sweat a lot, we were moving a lot, and at a young age, that was good. As we got older into Pee Wee and Bantam, so 13, 14, that's when hockey got pretty serious. But what I did notice about Mr. Rose is that he continued with the fitness with us. His practices got better. And then as I would speak to him, I would ask him questions because he was very good to me. And when I would speak to him, I learned through speaking with him that he was always taking courses. So he got to the highest level of coaching certificates that you can in Canada. So does that mean anything to me now? Like, no, I don't think that makes you a better coach necessarily. But what it does, it showed me at the time that he was doing more to learn. And I mean that as a kid, I go, oh, wow, you're really learning some stuff. So he's got some ideas where a lot of coaches wouldn't do that. And he did. He had. So what I realized is that as a player, especially in my the years that separated me from all the other players was when I was 2 years and 2 and 3 years before my draft year. I separated myself from like a lot of like everybody, and it was important to me that I was the best hockey player ever because I was always at the top, right? So I wanted to be the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. O was always there to make our team better, but he was always there to actually individually coach me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm sure he did it with everybody.
Yeah.
So he learned the Hockey Canada stuff. I saw in our systems, and he had terms. So he always wanted us to, like, if we didn't have a play coming in the blue line, to tight turn it and regroup, which isn't a junior thing. Like, it's not normal, but it was his thing. So regardless of whether it was absolutely right, we had a system whether it was right or wrong or the X's and O's were great. It doesn't really matter. We had a system, what I mean by that is that he had a plan, right? So he took some courses and he had a plan. And at that level, most coaches don't have a really good plan. So any plan kind of works, right?
Mm.
So he had a plan and he put players where he thought were the best, and we executed, and we were a very, very good team. So you got to think about it. Sudbury, Ontario, when you're going to play, like, it's not a big city. And a lot of people don't even know where that is.
Yeah.
It's Northern Ontario, it's small, and we would go to tournaments in our Bantam years and win in the big tournaments. Like, I think we lost one tournament, but we went to tournaments and won the tournaments, like
Mhm.
in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Kitchener. Like, that's pretty good
Yeah.
from a bunch of ragtags from up north. We had 5 really good players, and the rest were like okay, but it was coached well. We were disciplined, and he demanded stuff from us. So that was really good. I'll just finish up with Mr. Rose. The other thing was, um, as so in Bantam, the last 2 years in Bantam, so the U6, U15s, and U14, we would run before games, every game. So a lot of guys, you imagine what parents are thinking.
Oh yeah.
But we would run before games. It would be like 45 minutes. Snowstorms didn't matter. We ran before games. A lot of guys didn't like that. Some days I didn't like it, but
Yeah.
I embraced it because he planted in their head that we're doing things differently, and he explained Russians and Swedes and Finns doing stuff like this. So I just bought along. So every game so tell me we're in a good shape.
Right.
So was it the best training? I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care. But the beautiful thing about that, every time we ran, he was the first in line, and he was running. So he was a fit guy. He had a really good attitude. He was such a nice person. He wanted to help. He had a plan. He educated himself. Was he the best X and O's coach in the world? I highly doubt it, but it doesn't really matter because he came prepared.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'm going to say about Mr. Rose, I think, right now, is that off the ice, he was a teacher at my school when I went to high school, and I was standing with a bunch of headbangers. That's what we called them back then, right? Leather jackets, long hair, earrings, and stuff. And I was shooting the shit because I talked to everybody, right? Like horsing around. And he walked by and he saw me and he gave me a nod and all that stuff. And then he called me to no, we were at practice that next night or that night, and he came up to me, pulled me out of the dressing room, and he goes, "Andy, come here for a second." And he pulled me in the other room, and he was concerned. He was so deeply concerned. And he looked at me. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "What?" He goes, "I saw you out there with those kids." He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I was just talking." He goes, "No, you can't hang out with them. You can't hang out with them." And he goes, "Because you have a talent, and those kids are not good kids." And he was just like doing that thing, and he was like deeply concerned. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Rose, I won't do it anymore. Like I wasn't doing anything, but I won't do it." He was so concerned. He thought that I was probably smoking weed on the
Yeah.
side and all
Yeah.
this stuff, and he was trying to get me out of that right away. But to me, it was like he could have just said, "Hey, why are you hanging out with idiots?" But he actually grabbed me, and I could see his face like so concerned for my life. And I'm like, okay, now when he tells me to go and do something, he actually cares about my actual being.
Yeah.
So that's a whole lot about Mr.
Yeah. So
Rose.
just
And there's more.
yeah, yeah. So to
But
to put a bow on it, just so there's something that to take away. So would you say it was number one because you felt like he cared? Would that be the number one thing?
I would say later because I think he cared. I
Okay.
think, no, no, no. He cared about doing a good job. Yeah, I would say that's a
So,
big
so
part of
like
it.
the reason you can flash back, you're 53, and you flash back to when you're 9 to 13, and you're like, I like Mr. Rose the best, let's say, because number one is that number one because he cared about you, about his job, about he just cared.
Yeah, I would say his give a shit meter about coaching. He took the whole job and put it in a everything about it. He put it as a very high priority in his life.
Cool.
I would say that. Yeah.
So that, and then with, I think kind of secondary to that was that he came and he was ready to a certain degree, like
That and,
prepared.
and that's the part that I think might be number one or number two. I don't know. I think the thing that impressed me the most about Mr. Rose is that yeah, he cared about the whole thing, but he came prepared and in every way.
Yeah.
Not I know he didn't lose sleep over, or maybe he did, but he came with a plan and he came with a guy that was in shape, and he
Yeah.
came in as an example,
So
if that's a thing.
sure. So there's two in no order, whatever. There's two, and then would the third be that like you said, he kind of did the things that he was asking. Like
For
you could
sure.
see that he did it.
For sure.
So would those be like a top 3 kind of thing? Like he was prepared, he cared, and he was doing the
Mm.
things he was telling you?
Yeah.
Like he was a good example?
Yeah. And I say, if we can say 4, he taught me without me really learning the lesson then, but he taught me that he was willing to put in the work too, because he did the workouts with us
Yeah,
and he did the education part.
right.
He always made himself
Yeah.
better. So it
Awesome.
was like, kind of like, if he can do it, if he can do all that, then we should be able to do it too.
Right.
And I wasn't sophisticated as that, as a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, but it was the truth.
Yeah, looking back, that's what it
Yeah,
was.
Mr. Rose. So I could look at him and say, so another way I would say this is that I could look at our bench and our dressing room and our practices and our games, and say that he's in, he's all in, so I need to be all in.
Right.
He's an example I need to follow. I don't want to disappoint this person.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. So, okay, that's cool. You want me to do mine?
I want to do one more thing here.
Okay, do one more.
So now, Mr. Rose, the funny thing is, this is the lasting impression that a coach can have on you, right? Of all the coaches I've ever had, this is the one person I've done this with. I've always kept in touch with him. I've always used him as an example because he was so fit and he was so far ahead of his time that we didn't even know. I was talking. I'm good friends with his son still, Jono. Hey, Jono. He watches.
Yeah.
But I'm so good. I'm such good friends with Jono, like a wonderful family. But Mr. Rose was always like, he knew about plyometrics. We didn't know. No one knew what the term was. And the energy systems. He had us go to the university and get our VO2 max done, and we're all like, what? But it was
Cool.
important to him, and I learned about stuff like that, and I think it had an effect on like my future, like in doing what I do now. And so I've always used him as an example. I've always appreciated the stuff that he brought me. Like, even though, so even the fitness stuff might have been the biggest piece of it,
Mhm.
not hockey. And that's not a slight to his hockey. It was just the fitness piece, and the commitment to fitness was kind of, looking back. I was that guy was at 45 or 50 years old and grinding away.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then I've always kept in touch with him, except for the last year or so because of COVID and stuff. But Jono told me where he's at and all that stuff, and it's all good. But he stopped in here to visit me when he was in Florida. I'm hoping when Charlie plays in Sudbury this year, we're going up, and I'm hoping he's in town. But Jono says he usually goes to Florida in the winter. But I would love to bring him to a game with.
Yeah.
Anyways, but he came to visit me 2-3 summers ago with Jono. And when he walked in, I was just like, this guy's awesome. And you met him, right?
Yeah.
He was 80, 81, 82 at the time, 83. How old honestly, how old do you think
He was.
you would give him?
If I had to guess, I would have said he was like, I don't know, 65.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. He was in great shape. His skin was,
Yeah.
and I'm
fresh
like,
as a daisy,
so
man.
he was still an example to me. And the great thing about it was, he could have talked about the past, and we did a little bit, but he came in this gym and he said, "Hey, Andy, you know what I've been thinking about? Because he goes swimming and he does golf and he keeps himself very active. He goes, but what I do now is I throw balls in a squash court, and so I got an idea for it. You ever think of like turning this way, throwing a ball and turning around, coming back and reacting?" And he goes, "I think it would help with a lot of kids' quickness and reaction and all this stuff." 83.
Yeah.
83. He's still thinking of things, and his mind is still going on, how can you get
Yeah.
better? How can it evolve? He's awesome.